7-year-old Princess Charlotte, always graceful and composed, shocked the world when her unshakable poise shattered on live TV.
How does a quiet royal change behind palace walls end up capturing the attention of millions around the world? When a rumor surfaced claiming Princess Charlotte's bodyguard was removed after 7 years of service, it quickly evolved into one of the most shared royal stories online. But did any of it actually happen? What made this unconfirmed tale feel so emotionally believable to so many? And why are people so drawn to stories that unfold in the silence left by official statements? It began as nothing more than a ripple on social media, a headline that seemed both startling and oddly specific. Princess Charlotte's bodyguard got fired after 7 years. What she did next went viral overnight. The story gained traction not through official sources, but through screenshots, reposts, and speculation-filled blog posts. No announcement was made by Kensington Palace. No name was given for the bodyguard. Yet within days, the internet had pieced together a version of events that felt real enough to believe. According to those circulating the rumor, the young princess had built a quiet but unbreakable bond with a royal protection officer who had been with her since early childhood. He had been there, they claimed, at her first school drop-off, during key royal engagements, and even on private family holidays. The story claimed his departure was abrupt, unexplained, and handled with cold formality. But what truly caught public attention wasn't his supposed exit. It was what came after. The rumor described Charlotte as deeply affected. Some blogs claimed she stopped talking for days. Others said she created a private video tribute, something raw, emotional, and heartbreakingly personal. A few even insisted she had uploaded it anonymously to a private YouTube account, where it gained traction overnight. The truth, however, is harder to pin down. To date, no footage has emerged. No member of the royal household has acknowledged the video's existence, and none of the major news outlets have corroborated the story. But still, the narrative persisted. It spread not because it was proven, but because people wanted it to be true. And in that desire lies the heart of the public's relationship with the royal family, a deep yearning to see real emotion behind formal walls. While the palace did not comment, the idea of a long-serving royal protection officer being reassigned is not unusual. In fact, it's a policy. Protection for senior members of the royal family is handled by the Royalty and Specialist Protection Branch of London's Metropolitan Police. Officers are regularly rotated, partly to ensure impartiality, partly to manage fatigue and long-term assignments. It's not uncommon for officers to spend several years with one principal before being reassigned elsewhere, either within the same household or to a different detail altogether. This isn't exclusive to Princess Charlotte. In 2018, it was widely reported that Prince Harry's bodyguard, a former military-trained officer, was rotated out after a number of years of service. Similarly, Kate, the Princess of Wales, had her protection detail adjusted in the years following her marriage to Prince William. These changes are routine, operational, and usually handled discreetly. However, when the protected individual is a child, the story takes on a different tone. Children, unlike adults, are more sensitive to sudden changes in routine and environment. And for someone like Princess Charlotte, who has grown up under public scrutiny, her sense of security comes not only from her family, but also from the constant, quiet presence of those who operate in the background. Though no official name has been tied to Charlotte's current or former security staff, many observers have noted that certain figures consistently appear in photos during school runs, royal engagements, and other outings. Still, without confirmation, everything that's been said remains speculative. But speculation often fills the silence left by royal discretion. And when it comes to Princess Charlotte, the public has long held a fascination, not just because she is third in line to the throne, but because of how she carries herself. From her earliest public appearances, Charlotte has been described as composed, expressive, and strikingly confident for her age. Cameras have captured her correcting her brother's posture on palace balconies, waving with practiced charm during royal events, and standing tall in the face of global attention. She is seen by many as a blend of tradition and spark, a child who understands her role but still carries the vibrancy of youth. It is perhaps this perception that made the rumor resonate so strongly. The idea that someone so poised could still grieve in private, that even a princess could form quiet bonds that aren't always visible to the public eye, gave the story an emotional gravity. And in the absence of facts, people filled the gaps with feeling. The fan forums, in particular, latched onto the idea of a tribute video. Though no links have ever been confirmed, some users claim to have seen snippets, a girl's voice, a bracelet, and the soft background of piano music. Others shared their own interpretations, even creating tribute videos of their own, using public footage of Charlotte layered with imagined narration. While such actions blur the line between admiration and appropriation, they also highlight a deeper truth. The public's emotional investment in royal figures, especially children, often extends beyond what is reasonable or even respectful. But it's not new. Princess Diana faced similar phenomena. So did William and Harry as boys. The royal family lives in a paradox, highly visible, yet tightly guarded. And it's within that tension that stories like these take root. As speculation continued, the conversation shifted from the veracity of the story to the nature of royal childhood. What kind of emotional support system does a child like Charlotte really have? How do staff changes affect her? Does the family prepare children for such transitions, or are they simply expected to cope? These are questions without clear answers, but they opened a broader discussion online. Parenting experts weighed in. Former royal staff, including unnamed ex-protection officers, offered general insights in interviews. One former officer, speaking to a British paper years ago, explained that while they are trained to remain professionally detached, it's impossible not to feel a sense of duty that goes beyond protocol, especially when protecting a child. The viral nature of the story was not driven by a press release or a televised interview. It spread in waves, picked up by online forums, fan-made YouTube channels, and gossip blogs that often straddle the line between fact and emotional projection. By the time mainstream internet users encountered the story, the details had already taken shape. A former bodyguard named Thomas Albridge had reportedly served Princess Charlotte for 7 years before being let go without warning. According to the rumor, what made the story so compelling wasn't just the sudden dismissal, it was the alleged emotional fallout that followed, centered on a young girl navigating the absence of someone she trusted. But it's important to clarify again, none of this has been confirmed by any official source. The royal household has long maintained a policy of silence on matters involving internal staff transitions, especially those concerning the protection and well-being of royal children. Protection officers are not public figures, and for security reasons, their names and service details are rarely disclosed. That's why, in this case, no one has been able to verify whether someone named Thomas Albridge ever served in the Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit, or if such a person was reassigned or dismissed. However, the structure and duties of the Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit are a matter of public record. Operated under the Metropolitan Police Service in London, this elite unit is tasked with providing 24/7 protection to the British royal family and visiting dignitaries. Officers are highly trained in crowd management, defensive tactics, and threat mitigation. Their responsibilities go beyond the visible protection seen during public events. They are involved in advanced planning, route coordination, risk assessments, and sometimes even personal rapport, particularly when protecting minors. Rotations are not just common, they are institutional. Officers are often reassigned every few years to ensure a balance between professional detachment and operational effectiveness. This prevents overfamiliarity, reduces long-term fatigue, and keeps fresh perspectives in protective planning. For adult royals, these changes are usually procedural. But for younger royals, such as Prince George, Princess Charlotte, or Prince Louis, any change in familiar faces can be more emotionally impactful, even if handled gently. In 2018, it was widely reported that Prince Harry's personal protection officer was replaced shortly after his marriage to Meghan Markle. Similarly, in earlier years, Catherine, Princess of Wales, experienced transitions in her security team after moving into a more public role. These moments are rarely accompanied by public comment, but are routinely noted by royal observers who track changes in staffing through photographs and appearance logs. It is this backdrop of known policy that adds a layer of plausibility to the current rumor. Even if the emotional claims cannot be confirmed, the idea that a bodyguard who had worked with a royal child over multiple years could have been reassigned quietly and without fanfare is consistent with how the system works. The role requires discretion, loyalty, and above all, invisibility. Officers are trained to serve without leaving a personal imprint. But for children, emotional bonds can form in ways that aren't always easy to anticipate or control. Princess Charlotte, by most public accounts, is known to be confident and perceptive. From waving to the public during Trooping the Color to managing herself with grace at Queen Elizabeth II's funeral service in 2022, she has demonstrated maturity beyond her years. Observers have frequently pointed out her calm demeanor in high-pressure settings, noting how she often looks to her parents and older brother, but remains poised in her own right. This has led many to believe that she benefits from a strong support system, which would logically include not only family, but also long-serving aides and staff members who have been part of her daily routine. Even without verified names, it's understood that royal children tend to have a small circle of recurring staff, nannies, drivers, protection officers, and private tutors who help maintain consistency amidst a very public life. So when the rumor painted a picture of Charlotte losing someone she had grown used to seeing every day, it resonated not because it was confirmed, but because it felt emotionally possible. In the wake of the rumor, media outlets remained largely silent, avoiding the story altogether, possibly because the sources were not independently verifiable. But fan circles kept the conversation alive. The idea that a young royal might have been affected emotionally by a staff change was neither impossible nor implausible. It became a starting point for wider public discussion, not necessarily about Charlotte alone, but about the human side of royalty that often remains behind the scenes. Commentary soon extended to how royal children cope with structural changes in their inner circles. Educational psychologists, speaking in general terms, pointed out that consistent adult figures are crucial for developing a child's sense of security. In most families, a sudden disappearance of a trusted adult, be it a teacher, babysitter, or bodyguard, can be disorienting for a child. When this change happens without explanation, the emotional ripple effect can be harder to process. And when that child is in the public eye, with limited avenues to express those feelings, the challenge only deepens. Still, it's vital to acknowledge that none of this confirms the viral account. There has been no video found, no statement from any royal spokesperson, and no trace of an officer named Thomas Albridge within credible public records. What exists instead is a blend of emotional projection, plausible routine, and social media storytelling. The tribute video, if it ever existed, remains elusive, spoken of in vague terms, referenced by forum users without source links, and often accompanied by grainy screenshots that can't be authenticated. Yet the traction of the story points to a broader theme. People often look to royalty not just as symbols of tradition, but as reflections of deeply human experiences. Loss, attachment, and change are universal feelings. The notion that a child might quietly grieve a transition in silence, without fanfare or media coverage, is relatable, even if it remains unverified. And so, the rumor continues to live in a space between fact and emotional resonance. While we cannot claim the story is true, we also cannot deny why so many found it worth believing. The reality behind the walls of Kensington Palace may be much more measured, controlled, and ordinary than the internet imagines. But the emotional curiosity it inspires reminds us that beneath the protocol, there are children growing up under unusual circumstances, watched closely by the world, yet quietly shaped by the people who move in and out of their daily lives. While the emotional reach of the story lingered online, much of its shape was built less on verified facts and more on a familiar narrative framework. The idea of a young royal quietly processing the loss of a longtime protector connected with audiences in a way official news often doesn't. No confirmation was ever issued by the royal household regarding Princess Charlotte's alleged tribute or emotional response, but the story resonated all the same. The royal family, by design, rarely comments on staff changes, especially when it comes to security. Protection officers serve under strict confidentiality, and their assignments are rotated routinely as part of standard protocol. These rotations, often unnoticed by the public, ensure impartiality and guard against overfamiliarity. Still, when the rumor claimed that Charlotte had lost a long-serving bodyguard with whom she had formed a strong bond, people believed it not because it was verified, but because it felt emotionally plausible. Online, the rumor grew. Fan forums and social media channels added emotional layers to the story, speculating about Charlotte's supposed reaction and the tribute she allegedly created. Some suggested she had uploaded a video anonymously. Others claimed it had gone viral and moved thousands of viewers. No such video was ever verified. Yet users began producing tribute content of their own, using public footage of Charlotte set to music, echoing the tone of the rumored piece. This dynamic, emotional storytelling, thriving in the absence of facts, is common in royal coverage. Historical examples, like Princess Diana's relationship with her protection officer Barry Manicky, show that when emotions are involved, speculation often follows. While Diana's case was confirmed years later, most stories like Charlotte's never rise beyond the level of rumor. Even so, their reach can be significant. Professional protection officers are trained to build rapport without crossing emotional boundaries. Especially when assigned to children, they may spend extensive time in close proximity. But forming deep personal attachments is discouraged. Still, for the children, such figures can become familiar and comforting presences. When those figures are reassigned, the emotional impact may be real, even if it's not visible to the public. As the story circulated, royal observers noted the lack of any change in official photos or schedules. There was no indication from verified sources that a bodyguard had been removed, nor that Charlotte had withdrawn or altered her behavior publicly. But the narrative had already taken hold. It tapped into something audiences recognize: the quiet grief of children, the closeness to familiar faces, and the emotional disruption caused by sudden absence. What kept the rumor alive wasn't evidence, but emotion. Viewers felt something through the story, whether or not it was true. In a world where royal children grow up in front of the world, people often search for signs of humanity in brief public moments. A wave, a glance, a smile. These fragments become starting points for imagined stories that feel real. In this case, the story of Charlotte's tribute, whether factual or not, served as a reflection of how people relate to the royal family, not as figures of ceremony, but as people. And in that imagined space, stories like these thrive, offering a glimpse into the emotional lives of those who rarely speak for themselves. The story's staying power didn't come from its certainty. It came from its ambiguity, an open-ended narrative that allowed people to draw meaning from what wasn't said. It didn't demand belief, only imagination. For many, the rumor wasn't just about a royal child losing a protector. It became a broader reflection of how we interpret silence within institutions that rarely speak beyond rehearsed statements and scheduled appearances. Part of what made the speculation so persistent was the absence of any official response. The royal family has long maintained a stance of silence on internal matters, particularly where children and staff are involved. That approach, while necessary for privacy and security, often leads to more speculation rather than less. When people are given very few details, they fill the gaps. And in stories involving children, the public tends to lean toward empathy and emotion. The suggestion that Charlotte might have created a private tribute in the wake of a security change was never confirmed. But the very idea of it was powerful. It humanized her. It portrayed her not just as a figure in carefully curated photographs, but as a young girl possibly facing an experience that many children face in quieter forms: the quiet absence of someone they'd grown used to seeing. That connection to everyday experience is what made the rumor resonate, even without evidence. The modern royal family lives in a unique position, highly visible, deeply scrutinized, and yet expected to remain emotionally restrained in public. This tension creates space for these kinds of narratives. When official images show calm smiles and formal attire, the public looks elsewhere for signs of real emotion. That's why even an unverified story, if emotionally plausible, can gain momentum. Observers and analysts have noted this pattern for years. Emotional storytelling around the royals tends to take root when the official record is incomplete or silent. Whether it's about staff changes, family relationships, or royal protocol, the less said officially, the more space there is for interpretation. And in this case, interpretation evolved into a widely shared story about loyalty, grief, and quiet strength. The conversation that followed was not only about Charlotte. It touched on broader issues: how royal children are supported emotionally, how transitions are managed, and how public figures handle private changes behind closed doors. It prompted people to reflect on the real-life experience of growing up in the spotlight, with staff coming and going under a system that values structure over sentiment. Many who engaged with the story did so with care, not to criticize the royal family, but to imagine the emotional complexity behind the formality. This approach, though speculative, was largely respectful. It recognized that behind the titles and roles are individuals with ordinary human experiences, children who form attachments, who notice when someone disappears, and who may not always have the chance to say goodbye. In the weeks that followed, the rumor lost some of its momentum. New headlines emerged, attention shifted, and the original story faded into the background. But for those who followed it closely, it left behind a lasting thought. Not everything that matters has to be confirmed to feel meaningful. Some stories carry emotional weight even if they remain unresolved. There was no scandal, no backlash, just a quietly imagined moment between a young princess and someone who, whether real or not, represented consistency and safety in her world. And perhaps that's why the story mattered, not because it changed anything externally, but because it reminded people that even in the most controlled and traditional settings, the potential for emotional connection is always there. In the end, what made the rumor stand out wasn't its accuracy. It was the emotional space it opened up. A space where a child's quiet response to change could be seen, where the public's curiosity was softened by empathy, and where the silence around official royal life was briefly filled with something gentle and human. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.